Stepmom finally snaps after years of tolerating her stepdaughter's insults. The shocking moment she called me a gold digger in front of the entire family. I never imagined stepping into someone else's life and taking on a role that wasn't exactly mine. It wasn't a dream I had ever envisioned. But here I was at 32 years old, engaged to a wonderful man named John, who already had a daughter, Emma, from his first marriage. We had been together for almost 4 years, and during that time I had tried my best to be there for her, even though it was often a thankless job. John was 38, older than me, but we clicked right away. He was charming, responsible, and supportive, and after a few months of dating, I knew I could see a future with him. He was everything I wanted in a partner: steady, reliable, and kind. But there was a catch, of course. Like any relationship where kids are involved, it wasn't just the two of us. There was Emma, his 15-year-old daughter. From the start, I made it clear that I wasn't trying to replace her mother, but I also wasn't about to sit on the sidelines. Emma's mom, Linda, had always been more of a fun parent than one who really took responsibility. She'd occasionally take Emma shopping, but when it came to the day-to-day aspects of life, schoolwork, doctor's appointments, making sure Emma had a healthy dinner, it was mostly left to John and me. Linda wasn't absent, but when she was around, she was more about the wine and vibes than being a real parent. So I stepped in quietly at first, but it wasn't long before I became the person Emma came to for help. I didn't mind. I really didn't. It was never a big deal for me to make sure Emma had everything she needed. I attended every school meeting, even the ones that were a little awkward. I made doctor's appointments for her, and ensured she was keeping up with her therapy for anxiety. I cooked meals every night, making sure she wasn't just surviving on takeout pizza and sugar-filled cereal. I loved John, and by extension I came to love Emma as well. But I soon realized that no matter how much I did for her, no matter how much I tried to be there, it wasn't enough. Emma, who at 15 was old enough to be sharp-tongued, had a tendency to push boundaries. She wasn't outwardly hostile, but there was a level of distance in her demeanor, as though she didn't quite know where I fit into her life. And honestly, I didn't blame her. Her mom was still in the picture, and there I was, the other woman, stepping in to handle the things a parent should. It had to be confusing for her. But that's what being a stepmom is about, right? Stepping in when things aren't quite right, when they need someone to fill the gap. I never expected Emma to instantly warm to me. I didn't expect to replace Linda, but I thought over time we'd find some common ground. She wasn't my child, and I wasn't her mother. I understood that. Still, I had hopes. John was always supportive. He thanked me for being there for Emma, for handling things that Linda didn't seem to care much about. But it was clear that the dynamic in their family, even after the divorce, was complicated. John and I were building our future, but Emma's life was still split between her mother and father, and that meant she had her own version of reality too. In the back of my mind, I always knew this wasn't going to be easy. I wasn't sure what kind of relationship I could build with Emma. After all, I wasn't her biological mother. But I hoped that if I kept showing up, kept caring, we'd find a way through the awkwardness, the distance, and the tension. I knew it was going to take time. Then came the family dinner. As the months passed, things between Emma and me remained somewhat strained. There were small moments where I could see a flicker of warmth, like when she thanked me for making her favorite pasta dish, or when she would let me help her with her homework without protest. But just as quickly, those moments were overshadowed by the way she would distance herself, acting as if I were an outsider trying to invade her space. She would close off during family outings, barely speaking to me, and sometimes she'd even make sarcastic comments that cut deep. But I told myself she was a teenager. What did I expect? Adolescence was a tough time, especially for someone with a blended family. Still, it hurt. I put in so much effort to be there for her, and yet I often felt invisible. I had heard the comments from John, how he appreciated everything I was doing for Emma, how I was doing what her mom couldn't or wouldn't do. But when it came to Emma, it was like I was just a background figure. I wasn't the mom she needed. I wasn't the fun, carefree presence her mother provided. I was the one who made sure she had clean clothes, that she did her homework, that she ate something other than fast food. I was the one who helped her with her panic attacks when she couldn't breathe, who stayed up late talking to her when she couldn't sleep. I did all of that out of love for John and for the life we were trying to build together. I'd be lying if I said I didn't sometimes feel frustrated. There were days when I just wanted to scream at her to recognize how much I was doing for her. It wasn't just for John. I genuinely cared for her, but every time I tried to connect, I was met with coldness. It seemed like she couldn't see me for who I was. A person who was trying to be a good influence, a stable presence in her life. Instead, I was always the woman who was trying to replace her mom in her eyes, even though I never once tried to do that. And then there was Linda, her biological mother. Honestly, Linda was more like a distant friend than a real mother. I could see why Emma was frustrated. While I was at home, managing school projects, attending parent-teacher conferences, and making sure Emma had everything she needed, Linda was off doing her own thing. When Emma would go to her mom's house, it was like a mini vacation from responsibility. Linda would take her out to fancy brunches or shopping sprees, all the while ignoring the fact that Emma's school grades were slipping or that she was struggling emotionally. Linda wasn't bad, she just wasn't a parent in the traditional sense. I, on the other hand, was doing everything I could to make sure Emma felt secure and cared for. It wasn't that I expected Emma to see that, but I couldn't help but wish that one day she'd acknowledge it. Instead, I got nothing. Nothing but a cold shoulder and the occasional snide remark. It wasn't so much the comments that hurt. It was the fact that she never once gave me a chance. She saw me as an intruder in her world, and no amount of effort seemed to change that. And that brings me to the dinner. It had been a week of minor frustration, with a few snarky comments from Emma, and I had reached my limit. The dinner was supposed to be a big occasion. John's extended family was meeting me for the first time, and I was trying hard to make a good impression. I spent hours getting ready, picking out the right dress, making sure everything looked perfect. I wanted this to go well. I wanted John's family to see me as someone who genuinely cared about him, about Emma, about their family. I wanted to show them that I wasn't just the girlfriend, that I wasn't just the woman who was with their brother, son, or cousin. I was trying to show them that I was invested in the family. Emma, of course, had her own plans for the evening. She was distant and barely spoke to me. She didn't even look at me when I greeted her at the table. I tried to engage with her a few times, asking her how her week had been, how school was going, but each attempt was met with monosyllabic answers and eye rolls. I could tell she was in one of her moods, and at this point I'd learned to just let it go. John, who was always trying to keep the peace, smiled awkwardly, trying to get Emma to engage, but she wasn't having it. It was like I wasn't even in the room. Dinner started off fine enough, though. His family was warm, and they asked me questions about my life and my background. But Emma, as usual, stayed quiet, lost in her own little world. We were about halfway through the meal when the tension I had been feeling all evening seemed to peak. Emma suddenly turned to me with the most innocent smile on her face, the kind that almost felt sarcastic, and asked, "So, how does it feel being a gold digger with a uterus?" "That's what Mom says you are." The room went dead silent. It was as if time stopped. People froze mid-conversation, some choking on their food, others blinking in disbelief. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. The words were sharp, venomous, and the worst part was that she was looking at me like she was waiting for a response, as if she thought it was a funny joke. I was frozen for a moment, unsure of how to react. The silence felt suffocating. The faces around the table all seemed to turn toward me, waiting for my response. And then something inside me snapped. I leaned back in my chair, exhaled slowly, and looked her straight in the eye. I didn't raise my voice, but I made sure she could hear every word I said. "Oh, honey, I'm not your mom," I replied. "I'm just the woman who's been holding this family together while she's out getting her chakras aligned." The words felt like a punch in the gut, but at the same time it was the first time in years that I had said what I really felt. Emma's face turned red, her eyes filled with tears, and without a word, she stood up, bolted from the table, and stormed out of the room. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Emma stormed out of the room, her chair scraping loudly against the floor as she left the table. The silence that followed was unbearable. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I sat there trying to keep my composure. I hadn't expected to say what I did, but in that moment, everything inside me had just erupted. It felt like a release, like I had finally said something that had been building up for years. And yet, now that it was done, I was faced with the fallout. John, who had been sitting beside me, had gone completely pale. His eyes were wide, his mouth slightly open as if he couldn't quite process what had just happened. His hand reached out as if to touch mine, but he hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. His extended family was staring at me, some with expressions of shock, others trying to mask their judgment behind polite smiles. I wanted to shrink into the chair, to apologize, to undo the damage, but something held me back. I was tired of walking on eggshells, tired of being the one who always kept the peace. I had spent so much time being patient, being the bigger person and never speaking up, but now I couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't just about Emma's hurtful comment. It was about everything that had led to that moment, the years of being overlooked, of giving and giving without receiving any recognition. I wasn't just a stepmom. I was a human being, and I had a right to stand up for myself. John finally found his voice, but it was soft, almost apologetic. I think you should go after her," he said quietly, Still looking at the door Emma had disappeared through. "I don't think that's a good idea," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "She needs space." John's face twisted with frustration, and I could tell he was struggling to find the right words. "You didn't have to say that, though. You know she's just a kid, right? She's just repeating what her mom says. She doesn't mean it." But that was the problem. Emma had been repeating hurtful things for months, and I had been silently enduring it, trying to take the high road, trying to understand. But this time the insult was different. It wasn't just a passing comment. It was a direct attack on who I was as a person. It was as if she had no respect for me whatsoever. And what hurt the most was knowing that her mother had planted those words in her head. The tension in the room was palpable. John's family was split. Some seemed to understand where I was coming from, while others looked uncomfortable, unsure of whose side they should take. John's sister, Claire, was the first to speak, her voice filled with an almost nervous energy. Maybe we should all just calm down and talk about this later. Emma's upset, and well, she's 15. She doesn't fully understand what she's saying." I nodded, but my gaze was locked on the door, wondering if I should follow Emma. I wanted to comfort her, but a part of me felt like I needed to stand my ground. I wasn't just a passive figure in her life, and I wasn't going to let her think that I could be walked all over. John's brother, Mark, who had been quiet up until then, chimed in, his voice gruff. "You've been doing a lot for her, haven't you? It's not easy stepping into that role. But maybe you could have handled that a little better." I looked at him, meeting his gaze, and I could feel my frustration rising again. "Handled it better?" I repeated, my voice slightly sharper than I intended. "I've been handling it for years. I've been putting up with her disrespect, her passive-aggressive comments, and for what? To be called a gold digger with a uterus in front of everyone." John flinched at my words, and I could see that he was starting to feel the weight of the situation too. "I get it, okay? I do. But she's still my daughter, and I think she needs me right now. You've been amazing, but this is something I need to fix with her." The words stung more than I was willing to admit. It wasn't that I didn't want John to be there for his daughter. I just felt like once again I was being pushed aside. After everything I had done for Emma, I thought that he would at least stand by me in this moment. But instead, it seemed like he was more concerned with repairing his relationship with her than acknowledging the hurt I felt. "I know she's your daughter, John," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not just someone you can push aside when it gets uncomfortable. I've been here for her, for you through everything. I just want some respect." The room fell silent again, and for a moment no one knew what to say. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me, but this time I didn't care. For once, I wasn't going to apologize for my feelings. I wasn't going to back down. This wasn't just about one argument. This was about years of sacrifice, and I deserved to be treated with dignity. John, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm sorry. I should have been more supportive of you. I'll go talk to her. But we'll talk when I get back." I nodded, but a pit had formed in my stomach. Something had shifted between us, and I wasn't sure how to fix it. As John left the room to find Emma, I sat there, staring at the empty chair where she had been sitting moments before. My heart ached for her, for the tension that had been brewing for so long, but I also felt a sense of sadness for myself. I had given everything I had, and now I wasn't sure where I stood. John's absence in the room was deafening. His footsteps faded down the hall, and I was left to stew in my own thoughts, the words Emma had flung at me echoing in my mind. The uncomfortable silence at the table seemed to stretch on forever, but no one knew how to break it. His family continued to glance at me from the corners of their eyes, unsure whether they should speak up or not. I didn't blame them. The situation was complicated, and no one could have predicted that a seemingly innocent family dinner would explode like this. I knew John needed to talk to Emma. I didn't want to get in the way of that. She was his daughter and he was her father. But even as I thought that, I couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. It wasn't about Emma, no, it was about me, about the years I had spent trying to build a relationship with her, only to be knocked down every time. It felt like I had given so much of myself, and yet it wasn't enough. The family had mostly retreated into silence, awkwardly shuffling in their seats, exchanging a few murmured words. It was clear that they were all trying to process what had just happened, but they also didn't know how to handle it. I didn't know if I should stay or leave, but the thought of walking away seemed like admitting defeat. Instead, I sat still, my fingers gripping the edge of my wine glass as I stared into the distance, lost in thought. It wasn't until John returned that the room seemed to come alive again. His face was drawn, his expression unreadable as he walked back into the dining room. He didn't look at me at first. Instead, he turned to his family, offering a half-hearted apology for the tension in the room. "Sorry, everyone. he said, his voice strained. Emma's pretty upset right now. I'm going to go talk to her for a bit. We'll figure this out. Everyone nodded quietly, but the awkwardness lingered in the air. John's sister, Claire, who had been the most vocal in trying to smooth things over, turned to me with a sympathetic look. I think it might be good if you both talk when things calm down, she suggested gently. You know, sometimes teenagers don't really understand the consequences of their words. She probably doesn't realize how much it hurt. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the thing was, I had been putting up with Emma's hurtful comments for years. Her dismissive attitude, the passive-aggressive remarks about how I wasn't her real mom, how I couldn't replace her mother. I had taken it all in stride, kept quiet, hoping that things would get better. But tonight was the breaking point. Maybe, I said, my voice quiet but firm. But there's only so much a person can take before they snap. Claire didn't respond, but she gave me a nod, her eyes understanding, though she clearly didn't want to make the situation worse. The conversation around the table shifted, but I could tell everyone was still uncomfortable. No one knew what to say to me or how to help. As the night wore on, I could feel the weight of my decision settling in. I had said what I said because it had been building for so long. Emma had taken a jab at me in front of everyone, and I had finally stood up for myself. But the emotional aftermath was starting to hit me harder than I expected. I had expected some level of guilt, maybe a little bit of doubt, but it was more than that. It was a deep sadness, the kind that only came from years of trying and failing to build a relationship that was never going to be easy. John came back about 20 minutes later. His face was still tense, but his eyes were soft when he looked at me. She's still really upset, he said, sitting down beside me. She feels like I'm taking your side against her, and I don't know how to fix it. I could see the frustration in his eyes, the same frustration I had felt for years, caught between two people who couldn't see eye to eye, torn between loyalty to his daughter and his partner. It was hard, I knew that, but part of me felt like he wasn't really seeing the full picture. He was so focused on Emma's feelings that he wasn't acknowledging how much this was affecting me, how long I had been putting up with disrespect without ever voicing it, how many times I had gone out of my way to be there for Emma, only to be met with coldness. I don't think it's about you taking sides, John, I said, my voice calm but with an underlying edge. It's about me finally standing up for myself. I've spent years being disrespected, keeping my mouth shut, trying to keep the peace. But I'm not her mom, and I'm not going to let her treat me like this anymore. John sighed, running a hand through his hair. I know, and I'm sorry. I just want to fix it. I want things to get better between you two. I nodded slowly, feeling a knot in my stomach. I want that too, but it's not just on me to fix everything, John. She needs to recognize that I've been here for her, just like you've been here for her. She can't keep treating me like I'm some sort of afterthought. He looked at me, his expression softening. I get it. I really do. And I'll talk to her about it. But can you at least try to understand that she's still a kid? She's confused, and she doesn't fully understand everything that's going on. I get that too, I said, my voice quieter now. But I'm not a kid. And I've been doing this for years. We sat there in silence for a few moments, both of us lost in our own thoughts. I could feel the weight of the situation on my shoulders, and I knew that it wasn't going to be resolved overnight. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a single comment. It was about years of unspoken tension. Years of me trying to fit into a family that wasn't quite mine, and Emma's struggle to accept me. It was about the complexity of being a stepmom. A role that didn't come with a manual, a role that was full of challenges and compromises. I just hoped that eventually we could find a way to move forward. The next few days felt like an emotional hangover. John and I were distant, though we'd spoken briefly about the incident. He kept assuring me that he understood where I was coming from, but every time I brought it up, he seemed to avoid a deeper conversation. It was like he didn't want to touch on the raw, uncomfortable truth that had emerged that night. I wasn't angry at him, I was frustrated. We were supposed to be partners, but in that moment, it felt like I was facing this all on my own. And Emma, she didn't speak to me at all. She kept to her room, isolating herself even more. John had gone to her the night of the dinner, and when he came back, he said Emma was still upset. She felt misunderstood, like I was attacking her, and she wasn't ready to talk to me yet. I had expected that. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but the silence between us felt like a wall growing taller each day. I couldn't help but wonder, how much longer would I have to wait for her to realize that I wasn't trying to replace her mom? How much longer would I have to keep sacrificing my own needs for the sake of a relationship that was never going to be simple? The real complication, though, came from John's extended family. It wasn't just the immediate aftermath of what happened at dinner. It was how everyone seemed to have taken sides. The family was divided, and it was starting to make me question how much they really understood the dynamic between me, Emma, and John. The following weekend, we were invited to a family gathering at his sister Claire's house. John and I went despite the tension. I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't want to feel like the outsider, but it was becoming clear that's exactly how I was perceived by some of his family. I didn't blame them entirely, but it was painful. I had always tried to be the person who blended in, who fit the role of a supportive partner and stepmom, but now I was questioning if they even saw me as part of the family. When we arrived, I was greeted with the usual warmth from some family members, but there was an edge to the atmosphere that I couldn't shake. His mother, Grace, who had always been polite but reserved, barely acknowledged me. I couldn't blame her either. This wasn't easy for anyone, but the coldness in her eyes stung. Her gaze was one of quiet judgment, as if I had done something wrong by standing up for myself. As the afternoon went on, I realized the divide within the family was more apparent than I'd imagined. Claire was the only one who actively tried to engage me, but even then I could sense her discomfort. It was clear that, while she supported me, she didn't fully understand why I had reacted the way I did. She pulled me aside for a private conversation, her voice quiet and hesitant. "You know, I can see both sides of this." She started looking at me carefully. "I get that Emma really hurt you, but I also understand why John wants to fix this. He's her dad, and he doesn't want to lose her. She's still just a kid, trying to figure out her place in all of this." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "I know she's just a kid, but I've been patient for so long. I've been trying to make this work, but I'm not a doormat. I can't keep letting her disrespect me like that, especially not in front of everyone." Claire sighed, crossing her arms. "I get it, I really do. But I also think there's a bigger picture here. You're not just stepping into a relationship with John. You're trying to fill a role that's incredibly complex, especially for a 15-year-old girl. Emma's dealing with a lot of things that she doesn't even fully understand. And while her mom's been planting ideas in her head, things that aren't easy to undo." I felt a lump form in my throat. I knew Claire was right about Emma's confusion. It was one of the hardest things I had to accept. The fact that no matter how much I tried, Emma wasn't going to see me as a mother figure in her life. I wasn't her real mom, and I never could be. But that didn't mean I wasn't allowed to have boundaries, to be treated with respect. "I'm not trying to replace her mom," I said softly. "I just want to be treated like a person who cares about her, who's been there for her when no one else has." Claire's expression softened, and she reached out to gently touch my arm. "I know you're doing your best, but sometimes it's hard for people to see that. I think it's a tough spot for everyone, you know? I love you and I want this to work, but I think you and John need to have some real talks about what's going on. I think he's caught between wanting to protect you and wanting to protect Emma." It wasn't the first time I'd heard this, but hearing it from Claire made it feel more real. I understood John's desire to protect his daughter. I did, but I wasn't sure if he understood how much I needed protection too. How much I needed him to have my back. It wasn't just about his daughter being upset. It was about us, about our relationship and what it meant to be a family. That afternoon, Emma's absence was palpable. She didn't come to the gathering, which I knew was her choice. John had tried to get her to come, but she refused. I couldn't help but wonder if things would have been different if she had been there. If she'd seen how hard I had tried to make this work, maybe it would have made a difference. But that's the thing with family dynamics. There's no one right way to fix things. Some things, no matter how hard you try, can't be repaired overnight. As the evening wound down, I found myself sitting alone in the kitchen, nursing a glass of wine. John had gone to speak with his brother, Mark, and I was left to process everything that had happened. The conversation with Claire had helped, but I still felt lost. I loved John and I wanted to make this work for us, but the road ahead felt uncertain. The family was divided, and I wasn't sure if I could bridge the gap alone. I had spent so much of my life trying to please others, trying to fit into roles that weren't meant for me. But now I couldn't help but wonder if I had been giving too much of myself, only to be left with nothing in return. The realization was hard to swallow, but it was there, plain and simple. No matter how much I tried, some things would never be easy. Some things would never change. The weeks following the family gathering felt like walking through a fog. Things with Emma hadn't improved. If anything, they had become even more strained. She stayed in her room most of the time, barely acknowledging my presence when I tried to speak with her. John and I were still drifting in a sea of unspoken frustration. He was torn between being a supportive father to his daughter and a partner to me, and I couldn't help but feel like I was caught in the middle of something I couldn't control. There were moments when I thought I should give up, walk away, and let them figure it out, but I knew that wasn't really an option. I had already invested so much into this relationship. I had cared for Emma as if she were my own, even when it didn't feel like she cared for me in return. I had given up so much of myself to be there for John, for Emma, for the life we were building together, and yet it seemed like it wasn't enough. I spent a lot of time thinking about the night of the dinner, the moment when I had finally snapped when I had said those words to Emma. I had told myself that I needed to stand up for myself, that I had to stop being the person who silently took all the disrespect. But as the days passed, I began to wonder if I had gone too far. Maybe I had been too harsh. Maybe I could have handled it differently, with more grace, with more understanding. But then a part of me pushed those thoughts aside. I had been patient for so long, and I was tired of pretending that it was okay. I had a right to be heard, to set boundaries, even if it meant making others uncomfortable. The real question was, how could I move forward from here? Was it possible for me to have a relationship with Emma that wasn't defined by her mother's influence? Could we ever reach a place where we respected each other, where she saw me as more than just the woman who took care of her when things were falling apart? I wasn't sure, but I wasn't willing to give up just yet. I decided to have a conversation with John. We had been tiptoeing around each other for weeks, avoiding the real issues that were simmering beneath the surface. He had been doing his best to play the role of mediator, but it wasn't working. We needed to talk openly, honestly, and without blame. We sat down one evening after dinner, the room quiet and still, the only sound the faint hum of the dishwasher in the background. John looked at me, his eyes tired but warm. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. I nodded, taking a deep breath. "I agree. I think we've both been avoiding this, but it's not helping. I need you to understand where I'm coming from. I've been patient with Emma, I've tried to be a good stepmom, but I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. I've been holding it all in, but I can't anymore. I'm hurt, John. I've been hurt for a long time." John's expression softened, and I could see the conflict in his eyes. He reached out and took my hand. "I know you have. And I've been so focused on Emma's feelings that I haven't really stopped to think about yours. I'm sorry. You've been doing so much, and I didn't fully appreciate it until now." The words felt like a weight lifting off my chest, but I still had so much more to say. "I love Emma, John. I do. But I can't keep sacrificing myself for her when I'm not being treated with respect. I've tried to be her ally, to be someone she can depend on, but every time I think we're making progress, she pulls away, and I'm left to pick up the pieces. It hurts." John nodded, his eyes reflecting the pain he felt for both me and his daughter. "I know. I've seen it. I'm sorry I haven't been there for you the way I should have been. I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to try. I want to fix this for all of us." I squeezed his hand, feeling a flicker of hope. "I'm not asking you to choose between me and Emma. I'm just asking for us to be a team. I need your support, especially when it comes to her. She's your daughter, and I get that, but I'm your partner. I need to be able to stand up for myself too." John took a deep breath, his voice steady now. "You're right. We'll figure this out together. Promise. And I'm going to talk to Emma. We'll have a real conversation, and I'll make sure she understands that what she said to you was wrong. I won't let her keep treating you like that." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. Maybe things wouldn't be perfect, but at least we were finally on the same page. We had both been carrying the weight of unspoken words for so long, and now we were beginning to break through the silence. The next few days were awkward, but in a good way. John spent time with Emma, and I gave them space. It was clear that Emma was still processing everything, still upset, but I didn't push. I had learned that sometimes space was the best way to move forward. After a few days, John came to me and said that Emma was ready to talk to me. She still wasn't sure about our relationship, but she wanted to understand where I was coming from. We sat down together, Emma and I. She was still guarded, her arms crossed tightly across her chest, but there was a softness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm, trying to show her that I wasn't angry anymore. "I know I said some things that hurt you," I began, "but I want you to know that I care about you. I've been trying to be there for you, and I'll keep trying. But I also need you to understand that I have limits. I can't keep taking disrespect without saying something." Emma looked at me, her face conflicted. "I know. I didn't mean to hurt you, I don't know how to feel. Mom's always said things about you, and it's hard to understand why you're in my life." I nodded, feeling a pang in my heart. "I get that. It's not easy being in the middle of two worlds. But I'm not here to replace your mom. I'm here because I care about your dad, and I want us to be able to get along. I'm not asking for you to love me like your mom, but I do want you to respect me. That's all." Emma's eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. "I'll try. I'm sorry for what I said. I didn't mean it." It wasn't an instant fix, but it was a start. As we sat there, In that quiet moment of understanding, I realized something important. This wasn't about being perfect, it was about progress. Emma and I were never going to be the kind of mother-daughter duo that John and I had hoped for. But that didn't mean we couldn't find common ground. That didn't mean we couldn't work through the tension, the awkwardness, and the hurt. John and I were learning how to be a team, how to navigate the complexities of our blended family. It wasn't easy and there were still challenges ahead, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope that we could get there. Together.